Yes, everyone. And today we will continue from where we stopped regard to the deportation of the Nigerian women last week. And I'm here to give more update on how the deportation ended up because the last time my update was when the woman and her children was at Addis Ababa airport when they were stopped because of the medical impairment of the son. But right now, after a few days, finally the woman have arrived in Nigeria, and that is why I'm here to give an update on what really transpired to their deportation. If you remember last time during my session, I explained how this woman uh, was deported by the Canadian Border Service Agency, the CBS, Canada Border Service Agency, and the unreasonable decision made by the Federal Court of Canada, um, refusing to intervene on the deportation. And after several deferral made to the Canada Border Service Agency and explaining to them that this woman have really medical impediment because of the son. And we also explained to the government, which is the Canada Border Service Agency under the Minister of Public and Safety, that this woman will really face hardship upon arrival in Nigeria. Therefore, they deserve to be given exceptional approval to remain in Canada, considering that the child is an autistic child and this child is less than 3 years. In also, additionally, in the manner which the Canada Border Service Agency obtained business visa on arrival, valid for 12 days for this boy. All the saga, emulating from the, um, you know, the catastrophic deportation of this family. And upon how many days the woman spent in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, because the child was sick on board of the flight. Still, when they reached Nigeria, this woman was arrested by the Nigerian immigration. After the Nigerian immigration found out that the visa on arrival, which is the approval documents signed by the Assistant Controller General of Immigration, was false documents. The woman was arrested, and even the application, according to the Canada Border Service Agency, that they made this visa on arrival approval, no payment was made to the Nigerian government. And the Nigerian immigration taxed this woman to pay $275, considering that the woman have no fund with her in regards to all what I have explained on my previous session before the deportation or when they were stuck in Addis Ababa. The woman had no funds and the immigration detained them for several hours. And as I'm talking to you, they seized the Canadian passports, the passport of the son who is under 3 years, because the Nigeria immigration found out that the visa was not an authentic visa approval, because there's no way, as I explained, there is no way a child under 3 years could have obtained this 12 days business visa on arrival, making it, non and void, because based on my previous alarm, which I raised, that this is very, very suspicious. But that suspicion become reality when the woman arrived in Nigeria. That means the visa in turn, was not an authentic visa issued by the Nigerian immigration. And in this aspect, this is exactly the reason I raised the alarm that this is forced deportation and the wrongful removal of a child, which is against the International Convention on Child Rights, because regardless, this child was subject of custody litigation or custody battle between the mother and the father. And the father, who is still in Canada, who on my investigation shows that the father have a Canadian permanent resident. And therefore, there's no way this child should have been removed out of Canada, considering that the child is subject of a custody battle in the courts of Quebec. So for this reason, and if you notice that the last 2 weeks, there was also a Nigerian family that was about to be deported before the intervention of the minister after all the organization raised alarm and the protest, which I'm going to play here for you to see how the deportation of this particular woman was stopped.
In this community, I can see that one, the hospitality, the love, regardless of your skin color, they show
So I want
love.
you to have a
You
listen
can see this.
for this
So
woman to
they show
understand this is a
love.
particular
They
woman
accommodate you.
that was
They
to be
encourage you. They
deported
give you.
last
I
2 weeks
believe. I strongly
before the one I'm
believe,
talking
even
about.
because the love I'm seeing here today is massive. It's so massive. I'm just like, oh my God. Many faces they are just seeing me here just for the first time. The support I'm getting, I don't know. It's honest. I can't explain it. I can't even I can't explain it. But seeing people around me, though it has been a stressful and very very pathetic situation, but many of them they are like, don't worry, there is hope. Don't worry, there is hope. There is hope. So I want to appreciate everyone for doing this for me. It's like, when you this since I had the date, myself and my family, it's been like they are giving us death sentence because I see no future for my children, for myself.
If we deport, if we push back people like Deborah and his husband, who we are as a society, what are your values, Minister Miller? So I'm urging you to stop this deportation and to keep Deborah, her husband, and her family here with us in Montreal and in Quebec.
So in this aspect, you can see the woman, the person that the Canadian authority wanted to deport. That was last 2 weeks before the other woman I'm talking about who got stuck in Addis Ababa. So every day, a lot of people, failed asylum seekers in Canada, you know, get deportation order from the Canada Border Service Agency. I already emphasized that Canada Border Service Agency receive at least minimum of 46 million Canadian dollar per year to enforce removal of failed asylum seekers. At the same time, the Canadian authority canvassing that they need immigrants. They need people to migrate to Canada, whether it's for work or for refugee or for international students. But at the same time, it's difficult for the government to, stabilize those already groomed into the system. in terms of legalizing them and making them feel comfortable, there is no way the government should be recycling immigrants every year by bringing new people and shipping back new people. And if you check, like 46 million Canadian dollar per year is a lot of money that could have been injected into the system to boost the economy instead of using it to deport illegal as failed asylum seekers. In this aspect, okay, there's supposed to be a remedy for failed asylum seekers already into the system. Most of them have learned, uh, went to school, some of them learned some work, a lot of them have handwork, that can contribute to the economy of the country. But those people, after 9 years, 7 years, 8 years, after they fail their, they exhaust all their domestic remedy in terms of political asylum as a refugee, and they failed their appeal, they went to federal court for application for leave and judicial review, and all the domestic remedy become exhausted. Then the Canada Border Service Agency then have to issue a removal order, and they then use the taxpayers' money to enforce this removal on people that already in the system for more than 10 years that can contribute to the economy of the nation. The problem in Canada immigration is a very sensitive portfolio because it's like example in Nigeria, Minister of Petroleum in Nigeria is kind of a sensitive portfolio. So when you come to Canada, because they boost their economy based on immigration, immigration minister or that portfolio of citizenship and immigration is a very sensitive one. And if we check in the last few years, from 2015, the Liberal government under the Trudeau assumed office, there has been more than 5 to 6, almost to 7 immigration ministers changed. The same way they changed the Minister of Public and Safety. So they substitute them every year, every 2 years. So before one immigration officer will implement his policy, he will be removed and another person will be subchanged. And this creates a very big problem, even though that as at last year, there are almost 4 million backlogs. And those applications up to now have not been ratified. So there is a little bit confusion between the Canada Border Service Agency and the immigration, which is the Citizenship and Immigration, because the collaboration is not really adequate. And I'm calling on the Minister of Public and Safety and the Minister of Immigration to re-examine their policy in terms of refugee and asylum seekers, because in the manner which the Canada Border Service Agency remove immigrants or those even without criminal record, those are failed asylum seekers with their family, regardless of the hardship and the medical impediment they face and the irreparable harm which they may face at the hand of persecution, agent of persecution or persecutory country. This is very, very, very bad. One cannot sit on comfort zone in Ottawa and start implementing law that is not workable in local aspect of the grassroots immigration. So the point I'm trying to emphasize here is the Minister of Immigration for long time have been calling the Liberal government to establish immigration ombudsman, which can see the oversight of every decision that was taken by Canada Border Service Agency or Minister of Immigration and Citizenship or Refugee Board before any deportation can take effect. This woman in question still in Nigeria at this moment and also suffering with her son, and her son is a Canadian citizen, and I'm calling on government to look into all this situation because it's creating a bad name on the Canadian immigration, because the Canadian immigration was created to maintain the dignity and the good privilege of individuals to enjoy the right of citizenship based on immigration and refugee policy. But most of this policy has been decayed for a long time that need to be revisited. And some of those officers should not be given an absolute power to decide issues have to do with life and death of human being. And the Minister of Justice have a role to play in order to work together with the immigration in order to implement an enabling environment policy on immigration officers in order to take adequate. Hello, welcome back. So I'm going to let you listen direct from the Minister of Immigration, Canada, in order to understand the implication of what I'm talking about in regards to um, different ministers with different policies, which is making the Canadian immigration policy somehow very difficult to put together. This is a Minister of Immigration Canada. I would like you to listen direct.
Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me on, Vashi.
I want to start off just by delineating between permanent residents and temporary ones. On the latter, is your government going to, even temporarily while the housing crisis is so acute, cap the number of international students and or temporary foreign workers?
Well, it's something we're going to look at in the first half of this year, Vashi. That volume is disconcerting. It's really a system that has gotten out of control. And it's a conversation that we need to have with the provinces to make sure that the provinces that have not been doing their jobs actually rein in those numbers on a pure volume basis. There's a challenge to the integrity of the system, and it comes with institutions that have been leveraging the fact that there's been this permissive designated learning institution model and getting people from outside the country paying a premium dollar to come to Canada and not necessarily getting the education that they were promised. So that's something I think to look out for in the first half of this year.
And I do take your point on the role of provinces here, but I remember 4 or 5 months ago, this issue was already being discussed at the cabinet table, at the cabinet retreat in PEI. I was there covering it. And the idea that over the last 2 years, those numbers had exploded post-pandemic in particular was already on your table as immigration minister. Why are you only now starting to look at the prospect of a cap when you talked about floating it months ago?
And I will let that continue in a while.
Well, I think we need to get our own house in order federally. We need to be doing our jobs in making sure that we have a system that actually makes sure people have a financial capability to come to Canada, that we're actually verifying offer letters. So really getting our house in order, and then looking at this in a little more granularity, looking at where provinces have not necessarily had robust discussions with their designated learning institutions, particularly those that are profiting off the system. The steps that I announced in the fall were very much preliminary, making sure the federal government was doing its job. And now it's time for us to have a conversation about the volumes and the impact that that is having in certain areas, for example, on housing. It isn't the one-size-fits-all solution to addressing all of housing problems in Canada. But this is certainly in some areas contributing to some of the pressure that we're seeing, and it needs to be fixed in short order.
And I'm certainly not insinuating that it is one size fits all, but the Canadian Press report, for example, that came out this week showed that you did, not you specifically because you weren't in that portfolio, but that your government had in its world, in its level of awareness, documents from bureaucrats that showed that the kind of immigration that you were targeting would have a tangible impact on a salient impact on housing affordability. And we know the impact. You know, it's supply, yes, for sure. Your government is now doing things about supply, but 2 years ago you weren't doing the things that you're doing now. Why didn't you heed the warning in those documents?
Well, I'm not so sure that we didn't. Those discussions around the cabinet table are very robust when it comes to immigration levels. Different cabinet ministers have different views, and we discuss a whole number of things. We paid civil servants handsomely for their expertise in telling us all the things that could go right and could go wrong. And in this case, housing is one of them. As a country, we're facing a bit of a conundrum, like our partners in the G7 or the G20 in aging populations, particularly in the workforce. Tony Gravella of the Bank of Canada has said quite clearly that Canada stands first in having been able to reduce the average age of that workforce because of immigration. So those demographic challenges, which are generational ones and not sort of electoral ones, are ones that we find are extremely important. And our government has done a good job in doing that. Has it been perfect? No, it hasn't. Have we made mistakes? Absolutely. And I think when it comes to housing, this is a federal government that since 2015 has made historic investments that haven't been done for 30 years. It's not a problem that arose a couple of years ago. It's been happening for 30 years.
But respectfully, if even I do the simple math and I look at the StatsCan data from just last month, the net increase in non-permanent residents in just the third quarter, a record since 1971, was 312,758. The total number of new homes that your government has announced over all the announcements you've made in the last year is 266,646 over 10 years, 6,500 over the next 3 years. It doesn't add up. That's just the new stuff. That's just from 3 months. That's the number of non-permanent residents that have come in.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk about that, because it doesn't mean that one permanent resident equates to one house. And we've heard these horrific stories of people with 15 people that are in the same house. There are spouses that have work permits as well that live with other people. So it is not the case that it is a 1-to-1 ratio, but certainly volume is volume, and that impact is not insignificant. We're not necessarily talking about discretionary in the top of my mind of non-permanent residents. We're talking about people that are indispensable to the agricultural sector, some very expert talent that are coming from abroad that we can't get here, that we bring in to do work. We're also talking about Ukrainian people that are fleeing aggression from Russia, that are here in 200,000 of which.
But that's not from the 3. Sorry to interrupt. That's not from the. No. But that's not from the 3 months. The StatsCan report from those 3 months was very clear that that number was primarily comprised of temporary foreign workers and international students. A very small portion was refugees at that point.
I don't think anyone's proposing to provide the federal government provide a house for every single non-permanent resident that comes in, but we need to address supply in a rational way, in a way where the federal government hasn't done before, and that I think is what we've been doing over the last few months. But it's clear that over the next quarter, the next half year, that we need to have a serious conversation with our partners in the provinces to rein in those numbers that really need to have a second look at.
Am I to take from that the federal government will impose a cap? Because I understand that cross-jurisdictional issues here, but what isn't cross-jurisdictional is your ability to impose a cap on international students. Is that what your government plans to do, to be clear?
Well, we'll consider it, and we'll continue to consider it. If provinces don't do their jobs, we're ready to do it. And we don't have the same set of tools jurisdictionally that provinces have. They're best suited to take those measures, but we can take some very hard measures. Turning off the taps across the country can have some really perverse effect on some institutes of higher learning that really shouldn't be penalized for this. But our tools are much more limited than what provinces have at their disposition to go in and shut down the equivalent of diploma of puppy mills in Brampton, Mississauga, that are rife and should have been addressed a couple of years ago when the Ontario Auditor General came out with a report with a number of recommendations around that.
What I'm trying to make you understand here is that the complication of the Canadian immigration policy, because every 1-2 years, since the Liberal government assumed office, they changed the immigration minister and the Minister of Public and Safety, and they're interrelated in this immigration policy. But the problem here is that it's very difficult to leave one immigration minister for a long time to implement his own policy. But the problem here is that before the minister will, balance in order to start in his implementation of his own policy, he will be removed. And the Canadian immigration department is, or the portfolio is very, very sensitive, as I said. But, as I refer it to be like a minister of petroleum in Nigeria, which is very, very sensitive because that's where the GDP come in, because Canada makes a lot of money, if not billions, from immigrants, international students. So, but you see, the problem here is I'm not trying to encroach or interfere with the government policy, but being a founder of organization like Ekens Foundation International that is working with the grassroots asylum seekers and refugees, I understand the real problem with the Canadian immigration. But the problem is that this problem cannot be solved uh, 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 by someone sitting in a comfort zone in Ottawa. There must be a collaboration between the grassroots and the regional government in terms of and all the organizations that advocates of immigration reform, or the human rights activists, those that are working with the grassroots. Because if you visit various immigration detention centers in Canada, you will see a lot of people in detention, facing deportation for mere issue that does not really worth it to spend such money. I have a client who was deported with two doctor and sorry, four immigration officer, one doctor and one nurse. He didn't do nothing. And those people also, the government bought tickets for them, and those tickets, none of the tickets is less than $1,500. And so this doesn't make sense. Exercising ego by the Canada Border Service Agency does not help the country in terms of immigration policy, because the Geneva Convention of 1951 stipulated who is a refugee who have a well-founded fear of persecution. But when it comes to Canadian process of refugee and asylum seekers, it's very, very, very complex, because you don't need to have a legal background in order to be appointed as an immigration refugee board member here. It's a political appointment. Anybody can be appointed to oversee the fate of those people, which is very, very wrong. And that is why I'm still calling on the government to establish a Canadian immigration ombudsman for oversight. Even the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR here, and the Amnesty International, they are handicapped, and they've been, cornered by the Canadian government because they are not independent. I write to them every day. I communicate with them. I find out that those people are not independent. They cannot independently take a decision on their own, or to speak or go against the government, because probably because of the fund they are receiving, or because of the assistance. But that is why those people need to have vast knowledge on international law or international relation, international customary law, in order to understand how the convention works, instead of being influenced by the host party. So in this aspect, I would like you to also hear again from the mouth of the immigration minister. If you hear what he said about aging population, why, if Canada is 34 to 35 million population, when they have vast land more than US, why not implement a genuine and adequate immigration policy that accommodates everyone in terms of enabling environment policy of immigration, asylum seekers, implementation of the good policy, so that people will also come here to feel comfortable, not after 10 years they'll get deported, and the government keep recycling immigrants, sending some back, bringing them back. when people come to Canada and spend up to 10 years working in a healthcare sector, educational sector, or every other sector in construction, and they gain the experience, they should be considered to stay here. Why deporting them back? Does it mean the immigration minister is not independent? He cannot take decision on his own or consult people who work with the grassroots? What is the problem? Is the Minister of Immigration afraid of shy of taking a bold decision? Why not visit or make an emergency or unscheduled visit to detention facilities in order to interview those people direct? What are their own experience? Like example, we are talking about the Nigerian woman that was deported last week. Why will the Canada Border Service Agency forge approval, Nigerian government approval visa on arrival and hand it over to the airline to deport a Canadian citizen? This is wrong. And for this reason, it's very, very important for the government. I want you to listen again to the Minister of.
We're pretty much ready to use our weight if provinces aren't.
What does that mean, though, in tangible terms? If there are, let's say, 800,000 international students here, do you want to see that number cut in half, cut in a quarter? Like, at what point do you all of a sudden go in with the heavy hand?
Well, we have a sense of what those numbers would look like, what the reduction of those numbers look like. Out of courtesy to my colleagues in the provinces, those are discussions that we're first going to have around the negotiating table. It's not something that I would ventilate publicly on a Sunday morning, but something I think that we need to show that we're serious about, and we actually need to get it done to reduce those numbers.
I guess I have respect for the privacy of those conversations, but I also have respect for Canadians who are wondering how serious your government is about this. Again, these conversations have been going on for a long time. These numbers have been going up for years. The federal government did have in its purview the ability to use a cap for a long time. I'm just asking at what point, and look, you don't have to give me, 600,000, 400,000, but do you want to see a substantial decrease through the provincial actions that could take place? And then will you, at what point will you come in? It's not clear to me, I think.
Well, again, I think we have to talk about.
Anyway, we take a break and we come back on the.
Provinces, territories, and the federal government, and we need to all collectively do a better job about it. The strategic immigration
review. But I'm asking you about demand.
With my, sorry.
I'm asking you about the demand side of the equation. I understand the role.
Well, look, on the demand side of the equation, again, to the extent that there's a causation relationship, there's certainly a correlation. It will have a limited effect, but I think a significant effect in those communities where you have seen large spikes of international students, and those where the large influx of students, where rates go up, rental rates go up, cost of housings go up, people convert their houses to welcome students. That you will see, and there you will see an effect. Whether that will be felt across the country is highly uncertain, but certainly in areas where there has been the largest abuse, you will see, I think you will see an effect on housing. Again, this is contingent on interest rates, and it's contingent on a number of other factors.
Okay, I'm out of time, Minister. I do appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashi.
So this is what I'm.
No offense, but if you still think stock.
The point I'm trying to emphasize here is because if you are planning to migrate to Canada, you need to think twice in terms of you need to rethink to make sure that you get adequate information and you do enough research for yourself in order to understand the complication which I'm referring here, in order to understand that if you make any mistake in terms of trying to migrate to Canada without adequate research, you may get stopped. Because I've seen a lot of people here who have get stopped after they sold whatever they have and sold everything, and or maybe pay like $20,000 to $30,000 as an international student, and they come here, they get stopped. If you come here as an international student, you will have a work permit probably to duration of the time of your study or your program, but you will have limited time of work. Your working hour will be restricted, so therefore you will not be able to maybe have um, a, a full dependence on your work to support your school. So you must make sure that you have enough money. I think since January, the government made it compulsory that you must have at least we're talking about um, 22,000 Canadian dollars. So you really need to have enough money, and you need to rethink whether it's worth it for you to spend 22,000 Canadian dollars to come here for school on 1 year program and working for less than maybe 20 hours. Probably the work could be available or not being available. So it's something you really need to rethink and do enough research, because I work with the grassroots refugee and asylum seekers, so I know what they see every day, and I know their difficulties. And the government is not really interested of getting all those things fixed, because all what the ministers are doing is political statements that doesn't benefit the grassroots of immigration and refugee asylum seekers that needed those helps. So I believe that if the minister wants to succeed before they remove him, definitely is going to be removed soon, now or later. But he need to, leave a very good legacy, so it doesn't end up like his colleague, the former Minister of Justice and Attorney General David Lemaitre, who resigned and joined a law firm of colleague that he already supervised. I don't understand how somebody can after how many years of being a Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, you resign from the Parliament then and join a law firm. That shows conflict of interest. So it's a very conflict with the public interest or public distrust. So my advice to the migration minister is, I don't have anything personal against him, but he really need to rethink and work fast to revamp and re-overhaul the immigration policy as much as he can before he being removed. That definitely is going to be removed sooner or later, but it depends on the question is the question here is when, not whether he will, but because um, uh, he really need to consult those that are working with the grassroots, because things are not going well. And the issue of international students is very crucial, because the GDP of Canada is almost based on international students, the money the immigrants bring in every year. So um, today I'm going to end for today's program, but I will give you more update as earlier Monday or Tuesday. Don't forget that I'm the founder of Ekens Foundation International, and it's a think tank, civil and political rights organization, and helping refugees and asylum seekers. If you have any issue, if you have exhausted all your domestic remedy, we may have an option for you. Thank you very much, and my name remains Ekens Azubike. Share our program to make sure you reach other people in the vicinity. And if you have any question, send us an email or through WhatsApp or Messenger, and we will adequately respond as soon as possible. If you are facing deportation, there may be an option for you. If you have exhausted all your domestic remedy, and we are available to give you a free advice as much as we can. So we work as unpaid representative when it comes to immigration Canada, with a vast knowledge, years or decade experience. So share our program and remain blessed, and we will get back to you in terms of an update. Don't forget that Canadian immigration policy changes almost every day and is not consistent. Thank you.